Now we will have 3 attackers thanks to Ichorid. Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. This is MahfuzVanGogh, your dredge guy, and today we will continue the saga, our saga, to find the best dredge deck in Legacy. We started this new series yesterday, so if you missed our first video, please watch it first, because there I talk about what it is important to be evaluated in this series, because it is a series, it will be a series of at least 5 videos daily featured here on this channel. And it is important for you to understand what we are searching for. I will not repeat everything here on this video. Every information that you need is there. So watch that before. And what about our second day here? This is already Turbo Dredge 3.1. So not the 3.0 that we worked on yesterday. Today, there's only one little difference. It is the inclusion of Ichorid. Ichorid is a classic card in dredge strategies in Legacy, and usually older dredge decks used to play 3 or even 4 copies of Ichorid in the main deck, but it lost some space in favor of Poxwalkers, because Poxwalkers is so good. They do different things in the deck. They can be pretty similar sometimes because both are 3/1 creatures and both can enter the battlefield without being cast. But the timing they do this is completely different. So Poxwalkers is a better card overall, but Ichorid has some applications. It still has some applications, I believe. And I told you something yesterday about it. And now it's time to test a single Ichorid. At least it will be interesting to see how both cards can coexist in the same deck. Of course, we don't have other black creatures to be exiled to be Ichorid food, unless the Poxwalkers themselves, one Satoru, and our dredgers. But since this is only one Ichorid, I believe that's fine, that's doable. If we had 2 or 3 Ichorids, we would probably need more black creatures. But now, with a single Ichorid, I think that's okay. Usually we have more black creatures when Ichorid is in the battlefield, is in the graveyard, I mean. So what else? The rest of our deck is identical. I'm not changing anything because I feel that we need to gather more information to see how to keep evolving this. As I said to you guys yesterday, this is a series. So instead of going for a new deck every day, we are trying to evolve things, how things usually are done when you're trying to build competitive decks. So okay, we played 1 league, and now it's time to include 1 card. Then after this league, tomorrow we'll have something different probably, until we get to our best dredge deck in Legacy on Friday. So keep watching, because this is a series and every day we'll have some new things happening. Because we'll find other opponents, other strategies. Yesterday we played against 1 green deck and 1 combo deck, control combo deck, Nadu. We played against Tempo, we played against Control. We have several different matches yesterday, even Merfolk. So now, what the future reserves, what we have in our future. Let's start this league. I hope you enjoyed this. Click the like button, subscribe, leave a comment below if you have some doubts. I'm here this week every day just answering your questions. I still have questions to answer from yesterday, but I did answer many of them, and today I will keep answering them. So let's keep going. Use the comment section. I always hear seeing and answering you. And every time I stop a little bit just to answer comments, I like to do it because I feel like we're doing this together. We are building the best dredge deck in Legacy. And if you like this series, if this series is especially something, it means something to you, if you feel it is special, next week we can start doing the same, but in other formats. Maybe modern, maybe vintage, maybe pauper, maybe even pioneer, I don't know. We can do this in other formats. But I'm starting with Legacy because this is my bread and butter. So let's go to the league, click the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment below now, before it starts. And let's go to our action. Renting cards is the best way to play online, and you can start your journey, like me, on Mana Traders. Just use this coupon code that you can see here on this page to have an exclusive discount on your first 2 months. Now let's go back to the games. Alright, our first round we are on the play against Boergy. And this hand is a keep. We need to find something extra here, but we have so many good tools. So let's start. We have 3 lands, we have 2 of our best spells. Unfortunately, we are not playing a Surveil land. We could start here with a Surveil land if we had one. So Careful Study it is. Okay, nothing spectacular yet, but we did find another Cephalic Elysium. Let's play this LED. We will not crack LED yet, of course, but it's important to put LED in play as soon as possible in the blind, because your opponent can have discard spells, your opponent can have some way to disrupt your hand. Of course, Griff is banned, but it's important to play LED instead of holding in your hand, unless you have sure that your opponent is not a black deck. And my opponent has Orcish Bowmasters after a Once Upon a Time. This is different. Is this a black-green mid-range deck? Oh, basic Swamp. Another Goyf. Alright. Is this a mono-black deck with Once Upon a Time as a... No, this is probably a mono-black with a splash to green. Okay, this Otherworld Legacy is really good to us, because now we can... Do we keep Faithless Looting actually? Because we have so many lands. And now everything we want is to find our Dredger. So I think I will just mill everything here. Let's be objective. I will just mill everything. And then next turn I can play Cephalic Elysium now, and then play Cephalic Elysium again next turn. So we will have 2 Cephalic Elysiums and Faithless Looting available in the same turn, and Otherworldly Gaze. We could, of course, crack LED here and cast Otherworldly Gaze. Then we would have a Poxwalkers and a Cabal Therapy. We could take Orcish Bowmasters from my opponent's hand, but this is too much all in. I prefer to have more lands against this slow start that my opponent is revealing here. So, okay, thoughts is. You see, this is why it is good to just play your LED when you're not sure about what your opponent is playing. In some rare occasions, your opponent is playing white with Prismatic Ending, and you lose your LED. But usually, the best play is just to play what you have as soon as possible. Unless you can hold information from your opponent and you feel that's fine. So now we'll draw. Narcomoeba is awful. Is it? We have some options here. Since I want to draw more cards next turn. Okay, let's see. I can take Volcanic Island here. And now I think I will cast Otherworldly Gaze immediately. Because if this finds me a good Dredger or even more Cabal Therapy, oh, that's absolutely great. So next turn we can even win. Let's mill everything. We don't need any one of those cards. And now we can cast Cabal Therapy, sacrificing Poxwalkers. Poxwalkers enters the battlefield. And I know it would be tempting to keep that Faithless Looting to be your draw. Orcish Bowmasters next turn. But we don't need that. We have Cephalic Elysium and LED. Okay, my opponent is a mono-black deck with probably Urza Saga because of Lava Spur Boots and a Green Splash. They need more mana. So my opponent casts Lava Spur Boots and attacks. So I think we will win here, guys. We'll Dredge 5. Narcomoeba is good. Yeah, and now we can do everything. Let's crack LED for red mana. And we'll start with Faithless Looting here because we have only one Dredger. So it's important to try to find our second before... Yeah, you see? If you start cracking Cephalic Elysium, you can miss easily when you don't have that many Dredgers in your graveyard. So now we'll Dredge 5, and Dredge 5 again, and Dredge 6 finally. And we can discard everything. Our Grave Troll was missed. Narcomoeba enters the battlefield, and now let's return. We can win with Ox, we can win with Satoru, it doesn't matter at this point, so let's choose Satoru. So we can win with style. Our creatures have haste, so you have that dream scenario that we saw yesterday. Sometimes you can win by attacking with the combo, reanimating creatures. Our deck is just too strong. Too strong. Satoru triggers. We'll Dredge 6, and now we can cast Cabal Therapy. And as I said in the intro, one thing that I am watching here is not only looking for wins, of course we want to win, but we want to have that feeling if Ikorid belongs to this deck or not. Dredge 5 this time because we are almost hitting the very bottom of our deck. Narcomoeba enters the battlefield, we will Dredge 4. So we milled every single card. Let's win with 0 cards in our Namesticker Goblin, of course. It's the best name to name in Legacy. And now we can cast Dredge Return and reanimate Thassa's Oracle. Where it is? Oh, it's there. And let's remember to sacrifice Satoru when you reanimate Thassa's Oracle. And this is a win with the combo, Satoru kill. So, Ikorid. Ikorid was not necessary to win here. It was not needed. It was not even... We did reveal Ikorid, but when we did reveal Ikorid, it wasn't necessary. It wasn't needed because our deck just did its thing faster than that. Ikorid is a slower card. But okay, Ikorid maybe is not the best card to be evaluated in this position, of course, because our opponent didn't have a single a good card against us. After sideboarding, it will be completely different. This is a mono black or almost mono black strategy with artifacts. So I'm expecting a Spellbomb, Nihil Spellbomb, maybe Doubt Void Walker, maybe other cards. So let's think here. I will just submit the deck back again, like I did yesterday. I know we have a sideboard, but I don't know what my opponent is playing. And sometimes playing with LED and that many great enablers that we are playing today, we can even win against the Graveyard Hate. Let's see, because my opponent can always just play Fairy Macabre and Surgical Extraction. I'm thinking about artifacts because I saw Boots, but my opponent can play Fairy Macabre, and against Fairy Macabre I would not sideboard anything. So, because we don't have answers to Fairy. So it's better to just ignore it and play around it, of course, but ignore it. We don't need to include Forces, Daisies, Leylines, or bounce spells against Fairy, of course. Okay, we are on the draw. Oh, this is tempting because we can discard Grave Troll to our hand size, but I think we can do better than that. Oh, this is worse because we don't have lands. With a single land, this could be a turn 1. With Anger, Looting, LED, and Dredger, this could be a turn 1 with a land. Let's mulligan. Oh, okay, let's keep this and hope for a land on top. If we never find the land, it happens. But I will not go to 4 if I have an LED and double Looting in my hand. My opponent starts with Bloodstained Mire. Let's remember that our opponent can just Thoughtseize us twice in this first turn. So it's important to not mulligan so harsh. Oh, Force of Despair behind that Chromox. And my opponent is passing. So this is an obvious Orcish Bowmasters. My opponent will try to hit me when I draw extra cards. Okay, another Dredger. So we don't have much a choice here. I think I will just discard here instead of waiting one more turn. And let's resolve this Faithless Looting. My opponent is not playing counter spells. Okay, my opponent will crack the fetch land for a basic swamp. Here's the Orc. Orc hits us and we'll dredge 6. 2 Narcos are good. And dredge 5. Okay, we have Poxwalkers, we have a Cabal Therapy. No bridge yet. We have 1 dredge return. And from now we will just slow dredge because our hand was not that great. So let's evaluate here. I will cast Cabal Therapy targeting my opponent, naming what? Force of Despair, maybe? And this card is really good against our strategy. Let's start with Barrowgoyf because it has lifelink. No, Plague Engineer. Plague Engineer is also really good, so I think we're gonna lose this second game. Unless my opponent do the wrong choice here. They must play Plague Engineer and go for Zombie. My opponent plays Wasteland, taps for mana, here comes the Plague Engineer. Oh, it's Barrowgoyf. Okay, my opponent decides to play their draw for the turn. Probably because I named Barrowgoyf. Maybe this did put some warning into my opponent's head, maybe? We are not going to block this. But that's great, because now we have a chance to take that Plague Engineer from my opponent's hand. So let's dredge 6. Unfortunately, we didn't mill that many goodies. So my opponent will have a chance to just let's attack here, because I don't want to block Barrowgoyf with Poxwalkers yet. Because my opponent will have the chance now to just deploy their Plague Engineer. Is my opponent thinking about blocking with Barrowgoyf? Interesting. Why? Why did my opponent do that? They have a single Plague Engineer, they could kill my Poxwalkers. Well, unless I'm wrong and my opponent is holding some different strategy, I believe maybe my opponent is new to this matchup. Maybe they didn't get that Poxwalkers can come back in the future. Or that maybe they want to cast Plague Engineer naming Illusion just to kill my Narcomoeba. That's another possibility. Let's see. No, my opponent chooses Zombie. So it's the right call, but I'm not understand why. Well, what probably happened is my opponent didn't notice that Poxwalkers has Death Touch. Sometimes people just confuse Poxwalkers as an Ichorid, a different Ichorid, because it's a 3/1 creature that enters the battlefield from your graveyard. So let's dredge 5 here. Okay, now we have a Cabal Therapy. A little too late. We still have chances, guys. We still have chances because we have 2 more Narcomoebas and we have Bridges. And we already have Dredge Return, so we just need to mill the right cards. Unfortunately, we only have Dredge 4 now. Dredgers 5 and 6 are in our hand. I opted to hold Narcomoeba as a blocker in the case my opponent attacks with Orcish Bowmasters, but my intention is never block here. I need Narco. I need Narco as an engine to get my Poxwalkers back as soon as I have bridges. So I will have tokens, 1/1 tokens. Okay, 1 bridge. but only a single Poxwalker, so this is not the time yet. We already have Satoru, Bridge, 1 Poxwalkers. We need 1 extra Poxwalkers or Narcomoeba to win this game. My opponent is playing lands and doing nothing else. They can have another Force of Despair. That's terrifying. So my opponent cracks Polluted Delta. Okay, a Surveil land. This is the green splash. My opponent liked the card. They draw and attacks. We're down to 11, but this is doable because we are slowly getting where we need. Okay, my opponent taps 2 black mana. No Doughty Voidwalker, please. Oh, it's a Doughty. Oh, almost there, almost there. We just needed 1 extra creature to win this game with Satoru. Okay, so let's concede. So my opponent plays with Doughty Voidwalker, but they kept a hand without any sort of graveyard hate. So we don't need to go so deep into our deck. Daze is a consideration here. We could include Daze, but I think we have enough tools to win this game being on the play. So no changes. Okay, we are on the play. Okay, this hand is not that amazing. It's not an amazing hand, but I think we can keep this. It's not the greatest, but as we saw in the last game, my opponent didn't. My opponent also kept 7. My opponent is not playing Dark Rituals. So I think even if they have Orcish Bowmasters, Volcanic Island and Careful Study, even if they have, okay, our best Dredgers, even if they have Doughty Voidwalker, their only way to play a Doughty Voidwalker on turn 1 is with Chrome Mox. And I think this hand is a keep. Not the fastest, but it is a keep. Bloodstained Mire, crack it, for a basic swamp, and okay, Stalker. This Stalker grows, but 2/2 Menace is not that great against us. Let's see, Dredge 6. Okay, Dredge Return and another Dredger. Let's crack this Scouting turn, thinning the deck. And next turn, if our opponent don't show a Wasteland, we can even flashback Faithless Looting. Dredge 6 and Dredge 4. We have Poxwalkers, Ox, Tassas, double Poxwalkers. 2 Narcomoebas. Okay, we're gonna win. We're going to win. So Narcomoebas enters the battlefield. This is turn 2, and you see, we kept a hand only with lands and double Careful Study. We don't need to get to turn 3. So let's see what our opponent has. I'll name Force of Despair here, right? Let's name Force of Despair, because we will win this turn. Okay, just Plague Engineer and Damping Sphere. This was not a keep. This wasn't a keep, especially against us. Okay, Urza Saga can be a great card, but it is just too slow against our strategy. And now we will reanimate Ox of Agonas. Let's Dredge 6, and 6, and 6 again. Okay, unfortunately no Anger, but we can cast Cabal Therapy targeting my opponent, sacrificing Ox. So we can reanimate Ox a second time and win with hasty creatures. So now we'll take Plague Engineer. Yeah, Damping Sphere does nothing. So let's get Ox back, sacrificing 3 creatures. Okay, my opponent concedes. I love strategies like this focused on a single color, but this wasn't fast enough. If you're enjoying my content and want to support me as a content creator, the best way of doing it is on Patreon. Being there, you can read my weekly articles and also my sideboard guides to play this and other dredge decks in other formats. I want to say thank you to all my patrons that you can see here on this page. Now, back to the games. Round 2, we are on the play again. And, okay, let's skip this. Let's skip this because we have Otherworldly Gaze. We will start with Faithless Looting, of course, because we already have our best Dredger in our hand. But if we never find our second land, Otherworldly Gaze will probably do that. So Faithless Looting. Okay, it resolved, and we did find our second land. So let's discard Grave Troll and Poxwalkers and pass. My opponent draws Wasteland. Okay, so bye-bye Volcanic. And now we will Dredge 6. Okay, we did connect with a second Dredger. And now our chances of winning are pretty high if we find our second land. So I'll start with Otherworldly Gaze here instead of going for Breakthrough. Okay, we did find our second land. Now we have great chances of winning this game, because now we have more and more chances to connect our Dredgers to win the game in a single turn. My opponent need another Wasteland and a counterspell. No Wastelands, okay. So my opponent cracks his Scalding turn. Is this a Tempo deck? It is. Let's test our deck against Delver, Grixis Delver, Blue-Red Delver. Let's see. Dragon's Ray Channeler. This card is so good. When it was released as an uncommon, I was what? I was like, what? How this card can be just an uncommon? It does everything. Okay, so my opponent draws an extra card because of Bubble, and we will draw our second land. And the most reliable thing to do here is just crack Encephalic Coliseum instead of going with Breakthrough. Let's dredge 6. And that's exactly why. Because sometimes you, unfortunately, have a fail rate and your deck will not connect dredgers all the time. But that's fine, we still have breakthrough for next turn. And now we have an Arcomoeba, we have Satoru Poxwalkers, we have 3 therapies. So we can strip our opponent's hand, like we should. What we'll name here first? I think Daze is always a good option because I don't want to have my... Oh, triple Brainstorm! So it is a jackpot. Let's take triple Brainstorm from my opponent's hand. The best Cabal therapy ever. My opponent is stopped here for a while, just to contemplate their future. Brainstorm. Okay. Now what? We don't care about Murktide, we don't care about too much about any of those cards, but I'll take one extra card. Probably Bubble, because my opponents don't have green mana yet. So let's take Mishra's Bubble from my opponent's hand. Mishra's Bubble. And now my opponent has 2 uncastable cards unless they draw a land, so they can cast Murktide. But we don't care about Murktide, we just want to resolve this breakthrough and win the game. My opponent draws and attacks. They did find an Underground Sea, so they can cast Fatal Push or Murktide. It is probably Murktide, right? Fatal Push here has no use. My opponent is just deciding what to exile. Okay, it's a 6/6 flyer. So we know that our opponent doesn't have any counter spells. So we can dredge 6 here. We have our best blocker, a free blocker for Murktide. And now we can just win the game with breakthrough. So dredge 6, 6 again, 6 again, and 5. It's okay. Dredge 23. And now we can discard Thassa's Oracle for the win and some other cards. We have double Dread Return. We don't have an active Anger because we don't have mountains, but that's fine. So we have so many different ways of winning here. Let's do something different. I'll reanimate Ox of Agonas. And Ox of Agonas will draw me 3 cards. So we will not dredge, we are just drawing cards here. So we can reanimate Thassa's Oracle for the win. So it's a different double combination here with Ox and Thassa's. Usually we play with Satoru and Thassa's Oracle. Now we will win with Ox and Oracle. Okay, we draw 2 dredgers in a careful study, let's win. And many zombies, but we can win before attacking with all of them. My opponent did concede the game. Okay, this is our second tempo matchup in this series with this deck. So Daze is always a consideration against a tempo. Bounce spells are considerations, are good cards to be considered if my opponent shows many copies of Gravedigger's Cage or something like that. But usually I don't want to include bounce spells against a tempo deck, unless I'm sure that they play more than 2 Gravedigger's Cage. So let's take 1 Satoru, 1 Dread Return. We can keep Ox, is a card that we can cast with LED or double red mana. And probably 1 Otherworldly Gaze or 1 Breakthrough. It all depends on my opponent's build. Let's try 1 Gaze this time. The majority of the time this just doesn't matter. Our deck is so favored against tempo strategies that you can take 1 LED, 1 Poxwalkers, 1 Arcomoeba and win the game anyways. But of course we're trying to do the best configuration, the best possible configuration. Okay, no lands, no keep, unfortunately. This could be a great hand if this Arcomoeba were a fetch land. So let's mulligan. Okay, this is interesting. It is a keep. It is not the best. If my opponent did keep 7 cards. If my opponent has something like Surgical Extraction, his hand is super slow because we will need to draw something extra here. But with double LED plus land, plus Cabal Therapy, plus Dredger, this would be a keep on 5. So let's keep on 6. My opponent has a Volcanic Island and Darcy. So same start for our opponent. And oh, Cephalic Coliseum is absolutely amazing here. So let's play the first LED to test my opponent's hand. Okay, it will not connect because my opponent has a Force of Will. Exiling another Force of Will. Okay, my opponent doesn't want another Darcy. Let's see if they have a third Force of Will. No? Alright. So we'll grab our Underground Sea. And guys, if you're playing this on a budget, you can definitely have Water Graves and Steam Vents instead. We usually win with a healthy life total. So we'll name Golgari Thug. And now we'll pass the turn. And next turn we have Cephalic Coliseum and LED to enable our engine. Start our engine. Okay, my opponent taps Volcanic. Meltdown! What? Okay, my opponent did their sideboard. Yes, they did. Okay, we're gonna lose LED. I will not crack LED in response. We have nothing to be cast. It's so weird to have Meltdown against us. I believe this is my first time seeing Delver deck siding in meltdowns against us, because usually when we have ADD, we'll just crack it or immediately or in the next turn. So meltdown is a weird choice, but it did work here on this spot. So let's dredge 4. We have another dredger, we have Stinkweed Imp, we have Cabal Therapy. Let's play Cephalic Coliseum. We have one bridge in our hand, so let's crack this Cephalic Coliseum here. Okay, this would be a fast win without that meltdown, but now there's no guarantees. So we'll dredge 3 times, double Narco, let's discard Bridge, Grave Throw and Imp. Okay, we have a Dredge Return and an Ox, so we can go really deep into our deck here. But my opponent can have Daze as their last card. So let's search for traps before casting our Dredge Return, because we have only one in our graveyard, and we need to resolve it. And you see Bridge from Below in this spot does the same as a Poxwalkers will do, just creating an extra creatures so you can still cast our other spells. My opponent is taking so long here, so I think they have Daze. Let's see, Daze. Yes, they do. They are dazed. And now we can Reanimator Ox of Agonas. We'll have 1 Ox and 2 zombies, and we can draw 3 extra cards. Or dredge something around 16, 17. Let's see. We still have 1 Cabal Therapy there, 2 Cabal Therapies. So we'll dredge 6, another Narco, great, dredge 5, another Bridge, great, dredge 6. Okay, we have creatures. I have 3 therapies, no other dredge return, and no Poxwalkers. Where are our Poxwalkers? No Ichorid and no Ichorid. Okay, we have great cards in our bottom 15. Now what? I can cast Cabal Therapy here just to make a bunch of zombies. I will cast at least once, so we can put a Grave Throw back. This is our best dredger, so Grave Throw. My opponent knows that we have just dredgers in our hand, so no secrets there. And I think I'll just pass here, because exchanging in for 2 Ox for a 2/2 and another 2/2, not the best way to use a Cabal Therapy. So my opponent will attack here with their 3/3 flyer. No blocks. Is this a Murktide? If this is a Murktide, my opponent is casting something. If this is a Murktide, we can be in trouble because we don't have Narcomoebas anymore. Okay, it is a Murktide, a 6/6 flyer. Of course we can still win, but we need to mill our cards here. Okay, Anger, but we don't have Mountain. So we have 2 Poxwalkers, 1 Ichorid, 1 Dredge Return in our bottom 9 cards. Yeah, I have no answer to this Murktide. I think I should attack here, because if my opponent don't block Ox, I can sacrifice it so I can have blockers to Nethergoyf. If my opponent chooses to block only zombies, I can cast Cabal Therapy to do the same. We need to try to push some damage here, because my opponent can win in 2 turns. So my opponent blocks a zombie and another zombie. No? Okay, my opponent will kill Nethergoyf. That's not a problem. So this way we will not have our bridges anymore. They will be exiled, but we'll have 2 extra zombies for next turn. So let's order those triggers correctly. And now we have 5 zombies. My opponent has 11 life. Guys, this will be so hard, because if my opponent draws a spell here, I need my opponent to have nothing here, just a land or another creature. Oh, a Brainstorm, this is so good. So my opponent did draw great cards in a row, but it happens. Now my opponent will probably put this Darcy with Delirium. They still need something. So this Brainstorm needs to find another card, an artifact or a sorcery. Okay, here comes the sorcery. So this Darcy will be a 3/3. We are down to 4, and we cannot win the game unless... Yeah, no, we cannot win the game anymore. Guys, I cannot believe it. That meltdown, huh? That meltdown was super good. Of course, it wasn't only the meltdown, but how did we lose here? Because we never find our Ichorid or Poxwalkers. So you see, Dredge 6, just 1 Ichorid. So 2 Poxwalkers are in the bottom 3 cards. Yeah, it is what it is. This Ichorid is just a little too late to come to the party. So our last 3 cards are Dredge Return, Poxwalkers, Poxwalkers. Okay, guys, it's variance. Sometimes it happens. It happens. It happened to our opponent last game when they had 3 Brainstorms and we had Cabal Therapy. This is variance. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So being on the play, do we do something different? Maybe we can include... Oh, of course. I wasn't thinking properly. We don't have another Dredge Return. I did side out our second copy of Dredge Return. So maybe we can take Anger instead of Dredge Return here. We don't need haste creatures to win against a temple, especially because they can use Wasteland against our mountains. So this is probably the best way. We keep double Dredge Return, so we can still win with Thassa's Oracle. And we can chain... okay, this has no lands, let's mulligan. This is really good. And no mountain, but we don't have Anger anymore. Okay, this is good, I like this. I really like this hand. So these Poxwalkers will go to the bottom. Let's remind ourselves that this is an important information. So now we have only one Poxwalkers and one Ichorid. And situations like that, they make me think that maybe Ichorid doesn't belong in this deck. Maybe it's just better to have a Poxwalkers after all. I don't know, it's still the beginning of our journey today. So LED, let's test our opponent's hand like we did before. No, nothing. So let's cast our second LED. And now we'll cast Careful Study. Oh, for a moment I remember my opponent is playing Meltdown. Okay, so at least we have a Daze. Hope for no Meltdowns. No, my opponent probably has only a single Meltdown, right? So is that I'm just used to play LED against Delver as soon as I can. So my opponent plays Volcanic Island. They did have Meltdown. Luckily you have Daze. Let's see if my opponent has another counterspell. Please don't destroy my diamond. My opponent has Daze. Okay, now what? What is more important to win this game? One LED or two lands? Let's think. I think probably one LED, right? And now my opponent is behind because they don't have lands at all. If I keep my lands, my opponent can have Wastelands. But I don't think my opponent will have a second Meltdown in their starting hand. Even if they do, have so great chances of connecting this Grave Trove with a Faithless Looting. So yeah, let's crack LED and pay for these days. This is so weird. My first time playing against Meltdown in this matchup. And we have 2 white mana. Why not? We cannot do anything with our white mana, of course. My opponent plays Mishra's Bubble, cracks it, and passes. Alright. Meltdown, huh? Let's keep that in mind. So we'll dredge 6. No Faithless Looting yet. No Poxwalkers. We have one Ichorid, but no other black creature. Yeah, guys, this is why we test things. I'm not feeling Ichorid. If this was a Poxwalkers, we could disrupt our opponent's hand here twice, but now we cannot, and this Ichorid will not come back next turn. Yeah, and this is not about the deck building, because someone can argue that we need more black creatures to have this Ichorid back, but you see the other cards here are cards that I would have in other builds. Lands, LED, Cabal Therapy, just Daze. Daze maybe is the single thing, but okay, now we have Looting and Poxwalkers. So do I cast Cabal Therapy first? Because I really want to resolve this Faithless Looting. So let's attack first here. Since we have double Therapy, we can do that twice. And I don't think my opponent has a second Daze. They can have, of course. So I think they have Force of Will. But I still think the right name in this situation is Daze. Because if they have Force of Will, at least this would be a 2-for-1. But, oh, my opponent will do something here in response. Oh, they cast a Brainstorm. Okay. As I was saying, Force of Will is probably what I'm fearing the most here, but especially after that Brainstorm, Daze is still the right call. And if my opponent doesn't have Daze and they have Force of Will, I'll cast my second Cabal Therapy. Or maybe I go with Force of Will. No, let's go with Daze. Daze is just the right thing to do here. Oh, they have Force of Will, okay. And Psychic Frog. We have everything to win this game now. We don't have lands, my opponent... I can even take that Psychic Frog, because my opponent can hold a useless Force of Will in their hand, that's fine. So let's take Psychic Frog instead. Psychic Frog. And now my opponent has lands and Force of Will. Of course, and something else on top. So let's resolve this Faithless Looting. We will dredge 12, 6, and 6. We have an Ox and a Dredge Return. We have one Breach, one Ichorid for next turn. And that's all. Okay. Next turn, Ichorid will finally come back on turn 4. And our deck is not doing a great job finding other black creatures, right? Just one Sync Redeem so far. So Polluted Delta, and that's it. Let's clean a little bit of this. My opponent has now Force of Will, 2 lands, and just a single unknown card. So Ichorid comes back. We'll dredge 6. Okay, now we have what we need to win this game. My opponent can have Orcish Bowmasters, but I will not play around it. Because even if they do, we will still have creatures next turn. My opponent can have days. We cannot play around everything here, so let's attack first. Yeah, I believe my opponent doesn't have Orcish Bowmasters. They can still have days, or another weird counterspell. Let's sacrifice everyone. Yeah, no answers. If I ever cast another Cabal Therapy this game, I would love to see in my opponent's hand a meltdown. Another meltdown. So let's dredge 6. And dredge 6. Okay, we have Therapy, we have Double Narco. Another dredge 6, please. Yeah, and now we can win with Tessa's Oracle. We have Dredge Return, we have Devotion 4. We can win with Oracle, we can win with Zombies next turn. Let's see what our opponent has in their hand. I'll name Force of Will here, of course. I know that my opponent cannot play it, but I will name it anyways. Force of Will. Yeah. Oh, Surgical. Surgical Extraction. Okay, maybe my opponent is just giving up, right? They could save this Surgical Extraction for Thassa's Oracle. Maybe that was their plan. Just waiting for the right moment to have a gotcha moment. Maybe. Maybe. I will do that. But our deck has so many interaction with my opponent's hand that this is not reliable. So let's win with Thassa's Oracle now. And you see, if my opponent did cast, if my opponent chose to cast a Surgical Extraction targeting Bridges, that's fine, because we can win without Bridges. If my opponent chose to cast a targeting Poxwalkers, in that situation would be bad, but we had an Acorid, we had Narcos, and we had Zombies, so we could win anyways. So having different cards to win is good against Surgical. Let's go for our next. Round 3, we are on the play against Billbuscus. Okay, we can keep this. We can definitely keep this. Not our fastest hand, but this is so reliable. And I'm not sure about what my opponent is playing. My opponent also kept 7. So let's test their hand with playing LED without revealing lands first. Okay, it resolved. So I could cast Otherworldly Gaze immediately here, because if I do find another Faithless Looting or something, yeah, let's do this. Let's try our boldest strategy ever. We already have Dredgers there, because this way we can crack Cephalic Elysium now. Okay, all of them great cards, but since we went for this route, I will put everything in our graveyard and just crack Cephalic Elysium. It is super tempting to keep Breakthrough, but if my opponent has a Wasteland, this would be just a time walk for our opponent. So let's put everything into our graveyard. And now we can activate Cephalic Elysium. Dredge 5, Dredge 4, and Dredge 4 we have Poxwalkers, we have Acorid. Unfortunately no Cabal Therapy, but that was a good turn 1. Not the best, of course, it could be better, but it was interesting. We could of course just hold Otherworldly Gaze, cast it, then on turn 2 we'll try to cast a Careful Study. But that hand was so explosive, and it has the potential to win the game on turn 1. We still have the potential to win on turns 2 or 3 from here. But now it will be a slow dredge situation. Now is my opponent's turn. Polluted Delta, Grixis, for a Volcanic. Is another tempo deck? It is another tempo deck. Okay. So this Acorid will come back. Let's exile a Golgari Thug. First time playing Acorid in this series. Let's see if Acorid will save the day. Dredge 6. Okay, we have 2 bridges. Our 2 bridges are there. If I attack, my opponent can block just to exile our bridges. Honestly, I think this is the right play, because we will have 2 zombies and Acorid comes back next turn. So let's attack with Acorid. I don't think my opponent will block. That's why I'm not attacking with Narcomoeba. Oh, I was wrong. My opponent will block here. Okay. Honestly, I felt like my opponent would choose to not block because Darcy is so important for their strategy. But okay, now we have 5 power in play, 8 power with Acorid, and Poxwalkers is right on the corner. My opponent plays Delver of Secrets. This Acorid comes back. Finally, Acorid doing Acorid things. And we will dredge 6. Okay, I think now we will attack with everyone in the best aggro dredge way. My opponent will not block this time. Nope. Down to 11. And now I'll cast this Cabal Therapy, sacrificing Acorid. Poxwalkers will enter the battlefield. And I'll name what? Lightning Bolt? Oh, my opponent will daze that. Okay, it's a win for us. Not a problem. Next turn, Acorid comes back again. And we'll have lethal. My opponent needs to destroy creatures or have blockers here. Okay, Brainstorm is good for our opponent. They cast it. They will fetch. Not yet. And now this Acorid comes back. Let's exile 1 Stinkweed Imp. And we'll dredge the other one. Nothing good there. Nothing good there. Let's just attack. My opponent needs to block. Oh, they have Lightning Bolt? Yes, they do. They will bolt a zombie. If they block an Arco here, just to keep Delver on the battlefield, they go down to 2. So we have a single Dredger. It is a black creature. My opponent needs to destroy one creature and deploys another blocker to survive this turn. Okay, a second creature is okay. Mishra's Bubble will not save my opponent. They need to destroy one of our creatures. Or maybe having something like Stifle. No? Okay, my opponent keep both creatures on defense, but now we will have 3 attackers thanks to Ichorid. Okay, my opponent thought for a moment, but now we can attack. And we won our first game. Tempo strategies, so let's include days. Being on the draw, maybe Breakthrough is worse than Otherworldly Gaze. And I'll take one Ichorid this time, because we decided last match, that Dread Return is important to keep against Delver. Okay, this is a good hand. This is super reliable against Wasteland. My opponent plays Volcanic Island, and Delver, and Bubble. My opponent also kept 7 cards. Looting is absolutely amazing. Let's start with looting. My opponent cracks Bubble in response. Okay, looting resolves. We will discard our best Dredgers. We have Poxwalkers, Therapy in our hand. Okay, Delver did not flip, even with Bubble's help. Another Bubble. My opponent cracks it, and deploys a second Delver, and a land. And cracks it, so the top of my opponent's deck wasn't good to flip Delvers. A third Delver, that's scary. So my opponent attacks me with 1, but my opponent has only 2 cards in their hand. This should be probably easier, unless my opponent has a Surgical Extraction or something like that. Let's cast Cabal Therapy targeting my opponent since I have an Arcomoeba on the battlefield. I will name Days here because I have a Breakthrough. No, just remove a spell and another flyer. Okay, so let's resolve Breakthrough. Dredge 6, Dredge 5. We have 2 bridges there, Dredge 6, and Dredge 6 again. Okay, we will win this. We have Poxwalkers, Dredge Return, Bridges, Cabal Therapy. We have Anger. Our creatures have haste. Let's take Psychic Frog. Psychic Frog is a blocker, so we can take it from my opponent's hand. Psychic Frog. And Psychic Frog is also a blue pitch to Force of Will. So because of that, it is the most scary card in my opponent's hand. People are usually so afraid of Psychic Frog. But guys, Psychic Frog is just a flyer that draws you a single card, if connects. Just play the right deck against those strategies. We won 2-0. Let's go to our 4th match. Alright, we are on the play against Azerate 218. And this hand is a keep. I remember my opponent. My opponent usually plays with Doomsday strategies, so this is probably a combo matchup. So let's get things started. We will play Scalding Tarn. Let's test my opponent's hand with EDD. Okay, it resolves. So let's crack this for a Volcanic Island. And I'll cast Otherworldly Gaze immediately. Okay, we did find a Cabal Therapy. And another Gaze. My opponent kept 7 cards, as I did. So let's mill everything. If I crack EDD immediately, this Poxwalkers enters the battlefield and I have 1 shot with Cabal Therapy. Maybe 2 if I connect with a second Therapy, since I have Bridge. And then I can let something good on top of my library for next turn. It is probably better since I'm playing against a combo strategy. Probably, I'm not sure, but I remember my opponent. I lost to them in the past. So let's do this. And when you lose, you never forget. So Otherworldly Gaze being cast with Flashback. Poxwalkers enters the battlefield. We already have a Cabal Therapy there. It resolves. Oh, Cephalic Coliseum is excellent for next turn. Especially because it is also a good card against Doomsday. If this is Doomsday. So Cabal Therapy targeting my opponent. And I will probably name Dark Ritual here. If you are on my Patreon, you already saw some sideboard guides against Doomsday. And you know what I feel about this matchup. So let's name Dark Ritual. Okay, it is Doomsday probably. I don't see a Doomsday, but my opponent did have Force of Will and Daze. They could cast Force of Will and Daze. This is a slow hand. It seems like a Doomsday matchup. So my opponent plays Flooded Strand and passes. I actually enjoy this matchup a lot. It is one of my favorites. Not because we are always favored to win, but because I do enjoy play against Doomsday. Actually, I'm planning to... I'm not working currently. I'm working on this new series, but I'm working on a new hybrid strategy combining Thassa's Oracle in Dredge and Doomsday. I'm not a Doomsday player. I'm not an expert or anything, but I think since now we are also playing with Thassa's Oracle, we can build a different strategy that mix both archetypes. Just for fun, maybe. Now my opponent cycles Street Wraith and plays another Underground Sea, the first Underground Sea. They have 3 unknown cards in their hand. Let's cast this Otherworldly Gaze. And you see, I did hold Cephalic Elysium here because I know that it is super strong against Doomsday. Now we have another Cabal Therapy. We will dredge 6. Okay, now we have Ox. We probably have the win. Yeah, my opponent is conceding. We probably have the win here, just cracking Cephalic Elysium, targeting ourselves. Last turn, we weren't so sure. But this turn, yes, I could crack Cephalic Elysium here instead of holding with fear. This turn we could just attack for win. Okay, let's sideboard. This is a Doomsday deck. Sometimes they have another tempo strategies. We didn't see cards like Tammy or Psychic Frog in my opponent's deck, but this is a trend. Since 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I saw some Doomsday players including a tempo strategy, especially after sideboarding. Some Doomsday players like to have a Leyline of the Void, and because of that, a bounce spell can be good. Sometimes they play Thassa's Oracle with 1 card in the deck, so a bounce spell can be good. It works almost like a Stifle. And Force of Will is obviously good if my opponent has a turn 1. Having a Force of Will in your hand is also good. So everything is a consideration. Of course, I will not include 11 cards, but maybe some of them. We can take Otherworldly Gaze, Eco Read, probably Ox, another Gaze, maybe all of them. So you can include Force of Will, 1 bounce spell. If I want 3 of them, we can take 1 Dredger and 1 Breakthrough, trying like that. No Daisies, we are on the draw. 3 bounce spells and the playset of Force of Will. This deck has not so many blue spells as Blue Dredge, of course. So after sideboarding, now we have only 17 blue spells. In my opinion, 16 is the absolute minimum. Less than 16, you will not have a good Force of Will deck. 17 is so-so, but let's mulligan this. Okay, Force of Will, Faithless Looting, Cephalic Elysium. This hand is great, so let's keep it. So I believe 16 is probably the minimum, and that's why I still keep Force of Will in my sideboard. But I know that Force of Will is not so strong now compared to Blue Dredge. In Blue Dredge, Force of Will is super strong. Okay, I think I will play Volcanic Island, but I'm not sure if I will cast this Faithless Looting immediately, because my opponent also plays Daze. So if they want to combo, okay, consider. If they want to combo, it's important to have Force of Will with an open mana, at least until we have a threshold. Okay, my opponent casts Brainstorm, and Noxus Revival, huh? Noxus Revival can be used as a Graveyard Hate spell, and also as an enabler for them. Okay, another land is actually good because we have a Cabal Therapy, so we can cast Cabal Therapy targeting them. And you see how this game is different from the previous one. Okay, my opponent has Fluster. It's okay. It's a win. 1 less counterspell in my opponent's hand. In the previous game, we tried to be fast. And now, since we have Force of Will, we are adopting a new strategy. So now I'll play this Faithless Looting because next turn we have the potential to have an active Cephalic Elysium, especially now. I will not show LED. No, let's do it. My opponent doesn't have a counterspell, it seems so. And I'm doing that because, okay, my opponent will daze me. That's fine. Another counterspell that is used. And I'm holding this Cephalic Elysium because now you see we have 6 cards in the graveyard. With Force of Will, that would be 7. Oh, Dark Ritual. Okay, my opponent is going for it. So even if my opponent counters my counterspell, we will still have a Cephalic Elysium active next turn. So let's counter that. Okay, my opponent has a counterspell. Everything according to the plan. So now my opponent casts Doomsday. But with 0 cards in their hand, they can only win the game next turn. And we have our Cephalic Elysium, especially for that. Having a Cephalic Elysium is not a game over against Doomsday, okay? Because my opponent can have so many cards against my Cephalic Elysium. That includes the One Ring, because I cannot target them if they have protection from everything. That includes graveyard hate cards like Tormod Script, because they can exile my graveyard before I can activate Cephalic Elysium. So let's see. This is a Noxus Revival. Oh, my opponent has Grafdigger's Cage, but Grafdigger's Cage in the One Ring. But Grafdigger's Cage cannot do anything against us in that position. Even if my opponent has a second Grafdigger's Cage, I don't see that. But if they do, if they included a Grafdigger's Cage in the top of the pile, we can win the game anyways. targeting them with Cephalic Coliseum. They need to have something against Cephalic Coliseum, but they don't know that we have Cephalic Coliseum, right? My opponent is thinking here for a long time. Maybe they are away from keyboard. Okay, we'll dredge. Nothing special. And now we'll play Cephalic Coliseum and pass. Let's see if my opponent can win against Cephalic Coliseum. Oh no, my opponent is just conceding the game. Yeah, you see. Probably because my opponent didn't know about my Cephalic Coliseum in my hand. They didn't play around it, and we managed to win the game anyways. Guys, we are playing for the trophy next match. We are 4-0. Let's go, let's go. Let's go to our final match. Okay, this is our final round. Oh, we are paired against TheGrimLavamancer. It's a friend from Brazil, and I believe he is probably playing with Reanimator strategies. So I'll just compliment him. Okay, so it is a friend, but this game is for real. This match is for real. He's also playing for a win. So let's mulligan this. And this is probably good enough. Not the fastest hand, but it is a keep against Reanimator. I'm expecting Reanimator, but my opponent can play anything else, really. So, and we are on the draw. We have a fast hand if we draw a Dredger, for example. Okay, my opponent has something scary to start. Dark Ritual. He did kept 7 cards. Collective Brutality, discarding Griselbrand. Okay, my opponent will probably take my Careful Study or LED here. Okay, Careful Study. Can they reanimate Griselbrand? Yeah, they can. Now, my opponent can draw 7 cards and that's it. So my opponent refills his hand, plays Lotus Petal, another Dark Ritual, so Entomb. Okay, so my opponent has everything. Okay, Sire of Insanity. This card is usually okay against us because we want to discard our hand, but not with the Griselbrand and not this position, so we can concede. This was fast. This was super fast. My opponent had a great hand, and now we must do better, right? Unfortunately, we didn't pack our sideboard with specifically cards against graveyard strategies. So we need to rely on Force of Will and Daze, at least for this league. A Line of Sanctity is not good against Reanimator, and you know, bounce spells can be good against my opponent's deck if my opponent is playing one deck that I saw him play some months ago, which is the Reanimator with Chain of Smog sideboard plan. So if that's the case, bounce spells are actually good because I can bounce combo creature before my opponent can do the combo, and they will just discard their hand anyways. But I'm not sure about this yet, so I will just include Force of Will and Daze. Let's take Ichorid. Ichorid is super slow in this matchup. Let's take our Otherworldly Gazes are also slow cards. We need to be fast, but we also need to have Force of Will and Daze if we don't get a fast hand. Ox of Agonas is always scary, as Satoru is, because both cards can be reanimated for my opponent's side of battlefield, not on my side. I want to take something else to include Daze, especially on the play. So I think Anger is probably not needed here. If my opponent wins, they will win, he will win, like we saw last turn with many reanimation spells and winning the game easily. I still like Otherworldly Gaze, but we need to take something. Otherworldly Gaze is good because it's a blue spell. So let's take our red spells and keep our blue spells. Maybe one Breakthrough, one Otherworldly Gaze. It's my first time sideboarding with this deck, so it's not so easy. Let's take one Daze. Not so easy when you want to include both Force of Will and Dazes. You need to be careful to not shave too much of your deck, but at the same time we saw how my opponent can have a turn 1 win easily. We can also have turn 1 wins, but we probably cannot mulligan until we find a turn 1. Okay, this has Cabal Therapy and a Force of Will, but this is so defensive, this is a mulligan. This is better, this is really good, this is really good actually. We have a solid turn 2 plan with Force of Will, so this is good. And now we are on the play, so this feels good. Let's put Poxwalkers on the bottom. My opponent also went to 6 cards. And now let's start. Scouting Turn, Fetch It, for a Volcanic Island, and Faithless Looting. On deck. Maybe another blue card, unfortunately not. But we have a solid turn 2 and a solid turn 3 with both Cephalic Coliseums. Of course, my opponent can have Unmask and Thoughtseize and combo off on turn 1. Sometimes they have Reanimator players, sometimes they have it all. My opponent plays Polluted Delta and thinks. Okay, and passes. No. Second main phase, cracking Polluted Delta. by you. So this is indeed that different. Oh, my opponent will reanimate my Golgari Thug. I think I'll counter that. I need that card in my graveyard for next turn. Okay, so my intentions were to hold this Force of Will, but okay. Because now my opponents... We still will not win the game here because our graveyard is so fragile. We need more dredgers. My opponent is thinking, oh, they have Fairy. Okay, so they had a starting hand with Graveyard Hate and a reanimation spell. We have a Cabal Therapy. That's useless. Next turn we can cast Faithless Looting. Okay, now I'm not feeling that confident as I was before. But maybe my opponent also has nothing. Bloated Delta, because they also had a mulligan to 6. They kept a hand with Fairy, Macabre, and Reanimate. Both are great cards against us. Oh, my opponent has Witherbloom Apprentice. So my opponent can win the game next turn with a Chain of Smog. And we can only cast a flashback Faithless Looting. Okay, great cards to win the game next turn. But we don't have anything. If my opponent has a Chain of Smog, we will lose. I don't think he has a Chain of Smog. Maybe he is just playing around days. No, he's not. So it seems my opponent doesn't have a Chain of Smog. He opted for this road with a Surveil land. Okay, he doesn't want another Reanimate. Thoughts is targeting us. You can pick whatever you want. And of course my opponent attacks me, why not? No Fairy Macabre this time. It seems that there are no fairies. Okay, let's crack our first Cephalic Coliseum here. We have 3 dredgers, so we don't need to think too much here. Let's dredge our best dredgers there. Please, Narcomoeba. Yes, we have a Narcomoeba, we have Poxwalkers, we have Bridges, we have Satoru and Dread Return. Now we can breathe with some relief. We have 3 creatures, we have even Thassa's Oracle there, so we have the win. I'd like to show you guys here the win with Thassa's Oracle. Let's name Entomb, because it's the only spell that my opponent can have here. Now Animate Dead and Sejamur Witch. And we have double therapy, so let's first things first. Let's reanimate Satoru. Hopefully my opponent will let me show you all the combo in the case you're just new here on this channel. So Satoru triggers itself. We will dredge 6. Narcomoeba enters the battlefield. That triggers Satoru. So we will dredge again. Dredge 6. Another Narcomoeba. And now we have 13 cards left. We will dredge 6. Okay, no Narcos, but we have double Cabal Therapy. So we can even cast the Dredge Return immediately. That's okay. But since we have Cabal Therapy, let's use it. Let's use the first. Poxwalkers dies. Poxwalkers enters. Satoru triggers. We'll dredge 6. Another Narco. Let's say no to this Narco, so we can have 1 card left in our deck. And we can name Animate Dead. Or anything, really. Because we already have the win. And now we'll cast Dredge Return reanimating Thassa's Oracle. Remember to sacrifice Satoru. So Satoru will not trigger again, and we will not lose the game for decking yourself. And that's it. Thassa's Oracle for the win. Our last card was Stinkweed Imp. And we won. Okay guys, that's it. We have a 3rd game this round, and we have a real chance of winning a trophy. Now my opponent knows my deck. My opponent saw my entire deck because I won through the combo. So let's think here. I can probably take daisies from my deck to include other fast cards or bounce spells. This is hard because we could go for a super turbo road here. I could include Ox, Breakthrough, Anger. But we saw my opponent winning the game on turn 1, game 1. In this configuration here I have 17 blue cards again, 18 if we consider Satoru. It's good, it's not perfect, but it is good. I could take Looting, of course, and go only with the blue enablers, just to have more blue spells. But maybe my opponent will just go for the combo road. They can only win the game with the combo on turn 2. They can win with a double Dark Ritual or Chrome Ox or Lotus Petal, something like that on turn 1, but it is not reliable enough. So maybe we'll keep Faithless Looting again, even if you have less than 18 blue cards. I should probably include Anger, because Anger gives us a way to win on our turn 1, but we can win on turn 1 without Anger. If we have a LED, Enabler, and Land and Dredger, we can win on turn 1 without Anger. We can win with the combo. And since I took Ox from my... Okay, maybe you can keep this. Or maybe I'm just being delusional, because how can I keep a hand like this, right? We need a Force of Will or need a faster starting hand. Okay, I'll keep this. I know this is super scary, but I also know that I lost games in the past mulliganing too much on game 3 against Reanimator. And sometimes they have hands like this. Surveil land on turn 1, a creature on turn 2. So my opponent doesn't want Lotus Petal, so mana acceleration is not something they want. Okay, we found our best treasure. Let's play Volcanic Island and cast Faithless Looting. Force of Will would be amazing here. Instead of that, we have an useless Narcomoeba. But it happens. My opponent can have a Fairy Macabre, right? Because my opponent kept 7 cards. So instead of discarding 2 Dredgers, let's discard only one of them as a bait to their first Fairy Macabre. Maybe I should even discard a Golgari Thug instead, because I think my opponent has something. To keep 7 cards with this slow start, it means something, right? When you play Magic the Gathering competitively, you must learn how to... you see, Fairy Macabre. You must analyze symbols. What does that mean? What's behind that play? Not only what you see, but also what you don't see. Okay, another Dredger, so we can only cast creatures here. Now we are probably behind, unless my opponent kept a bad card, a bad hand. They only have 1 land, of course. Let's start playing creatures here. Maybe you can attack with them. As soon as my opponent draws their second mana source. Oh, no mana yet? Can we win just casting creatures from our hand? Let's attack with this Golgari Thug. Oh, and the reason why I cast Golgari Thug first is because we already have an Narcomoeba in our graveyard. So if my opponent kills my Golgari Thug somehow, even if they block with a creature, let's cast Poxwalkers, Golgari Thug goes to the graveyard and stays there. That's important. So Poxwalkers is there. My opponent's our clock here to win this game is 5 turns. My opponent needs blockers or spells, or lands, or anything. Now my opponent has 8 cards in his hand, and he can just discard Fatty at the end of the turn. Okay, my opponent found a second land. And starts with Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is fine. Now if my opponent cracks his second land, his fetch land, the clock is 1 turn faster. But of course my opponent has something, right? It is not a 1 mana cost spell. And it is actually good because we can discard our Grave Troll next turn. So let's attack here, dealing 4 damage. My opponent is down to 13. Yep. And I should probably cast Golgari Thug, right? Because it represents 1 extra damage in a couple of turns. And if my opponent has Fairy Macabre, for example, a second Fairy, it is better to just have my Golgari Thug in the battlefield instead of being exiled. So, okay. 3 turn clock, and we can discard the Golgari Grave Troll. What does my opponent have? Another Surveil land. That's really scary. They can even surveil a creature to... No, just Entomb, okay. I'm trying to be realistic here, guys. We are not favored to win the game yet. But if my opponent could not do anything this turn, my opponent cannot do anything relevant this turn, we have a real chance of winning. My Grave Troll can even reveal Faithless Looting, for example, and we can win the game next turn. So my opponent plays what? Collective Brutality, killing my Poxwalkers and draining to life. This is a desperate move. But my opponent discarded Atraxa and Griselbrand. Okay. So now my opponent can reanimate their creatures. His creatures. Now let's discard Grave Troll. We need some flashback spell to have these Poxwalkers back. We have one. Cabal Therapy. Cabal Therapy is our friend. Guys, with double Cabal Therapy, we can actually win this game. We need to be precise here. My opponent already milled Entomb. My opponent didn't... Okay, let's decide here. Do I want an Narcomoeba on top or not? If I want an Narcomoeba on top, I must select it now. But I could also just select Poxwalkers, and Poxwalkers just enters the battlefield, and I will not put anything on top. Let's name Animate Dead since my opponent has 2 lands. Oh, nothing! Just Dark Ritual. And another Atraxa and Griselbrand. So we have a shot to win this game in 3 turns. Let's do this again. So my opponent cannot cast a Griselbrand from their hand, of course. So let's name Dark Ritual. Dark Ritual. And now it's about my opponent's top deck. If my opponent cannot top deck something really good, we will win the game soon. We need 2 more attacks so my opponent cannot cast a Reanimate targeting Griselbrand. Or even Atraxa. We need to deal damage twice. That Collective Brutality was so good because now our clock could be... Oh, my opponent has something? Oh, my opponent had an Animate Dead on top. And this is probably the nail in the coffin because Griselbrand has lifelink. My opponent can draw 7 extra cards. Maybe if that 7 extra cards, those 7 extra cards are not that good, maybe we stand a chance. My opponent plays mana, 5 other unknown cards. It can be Reanimate, and my opponent cannot cast Reanimate right now. My opponent cracks for, okay, Dark Ritual, more mana. So my opponent did draw with Griselbrand. Lotus Petal, land, Dark Ritual, and another Animate Dead. Okay, and Atraxa finds Fairy and many more things. And my opponent used Fairy to exile some cards from my graveyard. Okay, they will cast their third Animate Dead, targeting my own creature. And now my opponent goes to the end step. This is just an humiliation, guys. Now we have nothing else. Let's draw. Narcomoeba. I will attack with my Poxwalkers. My opponent will probably block with Atraxa here, right? Because they can win 6 life back and then probably reanimate Atraxa again next turn. But this is just a bully attack because my opponent has 4 life. Yeah, my opponent blocks. GG's opponent. And let's concede. Almost there, guys. And that match, this last match, showed me that we really need Leilani of the Void or anything against a graveyard. Because matches like this are super hard to win without specific graveyard hate, even with Force of Will All Days. So it's time to rebuild our sideboard. Let's check a little bit more about our deck after this leak. So what we learned about our deck today, about our search for the best dredge deck in Legacy today. Well, one thing is something that we learned for sure. We need Leilani of the Void or something extra to win against Reanimator with some reliability. Of course, we could win that game with a little bit of luck or a better starting hand, or if our opponent didn't have a Fairy Macabre, etc. But probably Forces and Dazes alone are not enough to win against Reanimator if we want to build a tier 1 deck strategy. So we need to include something extra here, and I'll probably rebuild the sideboard for tomorrow. Besides that, the deck felt great. We didn't meet any other green strategy to test Leilani of Sanctity, and so far Leilani of the Void is not present in this metagame so far. We see lots and lots of Fairy Macabres, but not so many enchantments or artifacts to be bounced. But it is still a small sample, only 2 leagues. For 1 is a great result, but I believe we can do better. Let's search for our trophy with this new deck. About the main deck. The main deck still seems fine, but I'm not sold on Ichorid. Ichorid was really good. It shined when we needed against Delver deck, a Tempo deck, in the middle of our road today. But almost every time when I saw Ichorid, I couldn't stop thinking, oh, if this was a Poxwalkers, we would have a better line here than wait one more turn. So I'm not sold on Ichorid. I'll think about it until tomorrow, and I hope you enjoy this league here today with me. Click the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking about this saga. We are trying to hit our best dredge strategy in Legacy, and next week maybe we will go visit other formats here and doing the same. So it is important to me that we can do our best job or best work here this week in Legacy. And that's it. Tomorrow we'll have a slightly different deck evolving this Turbo Satoru Dredge 3.1. Tomorrow it's 3.2 time. See you soon. Bye.